This is a year 9. In the quiet town of Rosehill, people had always lived simple, predictable lives. The seasons changed. The markets opened every Sunday, and children played in the streets until the lamps lit up. But as the year 2025 began, there was a quiet whisper among the villagers, a feeling that this year was different from the rest. Some said it was because of the strange storms that came in early spring, stronger than anyone had seen before. Others said it was the rising cost of living that forced families to count every coin twice. But a few people, especially the older women who gathered at the tea shop, spoke of numbers. They said, "This is a year 9. According to the way they counted time in numerology, 2025 added up to 9. And 9, they believed, was not just a number. It was an ending, a clearing, a space where old walls fell so new doors could open. For many, it sounded mysterious, even frightening, but for Ethan, a young man who had just turned 25, the words felt strangely comforting. Ethan had been carrying the weight of old dreams that never seemed to bloom. He had studied engineering at university but ended up working in a small electronics shop. He often told himself that it was just temporary. But 3 years had passed, and nothing had changed. His notebooks were filled with unfinished plans for inventions, half-written applications for jobs abroad, and lists of goals he never reached. When he heard about the year 9, something stirred inside him. Maybe, he thought, this was the sign he had been waiting for, a push to finally let go of what no longer worked. One evening, Ethan walked to the riverside, a place where he often went to think. The moonlight danced on the water, and the air carried the sound of cicadas. He opened his old notebook, the one he had been afraid to look at for months. On the first page was a sketch of a small solar-powered device he had once dreamed of building. He touched the page gently, then smiled and closed the book. "It's time," he whispered, "time to let this go." It wasn't sadness that he felt, but relief. For the first time, he allowed himself to accept that some dreams were not meant to follow him into the future. All around Rosehill, people began to experience similar awakenings. Lydia, a woman in her 40s, had kept her late mother's dresses in the closet for years, unable to part with them. One Sunday morning, she folded them carefully and gave them away to neighbors who could use them. As she watched the dresses leave her house, she felt lighter, as if she had finally said goodbye. Mr. Parker, the baker who had run the same shop for decades, realized he no longer loved waking at 4 in the morning to knead dough. His hands ached, his back hurt, and yet he had forced himself to continue. In 2025, he decided to close the bakery and take up gardening instead. The townspeople were surprised, but no one judged him. They understood. Endings were necessary. The year 9 was not only about letting go of objects or jobs. It was about cleansing the heart. Some friendships faded naturally. Old grudges softened. Couples who had tried for years to mend broken bonds finally accepted that it was kinder to part ways. And in every story of loss, there was also the quiet promise of renewal. Ethan noticed this in his own life. He began to spend less time with people who drained his energy, and more time with those who inspired him. He stopped scrolling endlessly on his phone late at night and instead read books about science, art, and philosophy. Little by little, the space he created inside himself began to fill with new possibilities. By autumn, the town of Rosehill looked different. It wasn't that the buildings had changed or the streets had grown wider. It was the people. They carried themselves with a new clarity. Their conversations shifted from complaints to ideas, from regrets to hopes. Ethan, too, had changed. One evening, while clearing out the attic, he found a box of his father's old tools. Something inside him clicked, not the desire to build the same solar-powered gadget he had once dreamed of, but a new curiosity. He began repairing broken radios and clocks from the neighborhood. What started as a hobby grew into a small service. And soon, people from nearby towns came to him with items they thought could never work again. Fixing old things gave Ethan joy. More than that, it gave him purpose. It was not the grand invention he had once imagined, but it was real, and it mattered. As winter approached and the final days of 2025 drew near, Rosehill was alive with anticipation. The people felt as if they had walked through a great cleansing storm. They had cried, they had released, they had let go. And now, they stood at the edge of something new. The elders at the tea shop said, "The cycle is ending. A new one is about to begin. Next year will be the year of beginnings. Be ready to plant what you want to grow." Ethan looked at the notebook he once feared. Instead of closing it forever, he tore out the old pages and began fresh ones. He no longer needed to carry the weight of who he thought he should be. He was ready to build who he truly was. The year 2025. The year 9. Taught the people of Rosehill that life was not about clinging to the past but about clearing the path for the future. It was not an easy year, but it was beautiful in its own way. And when the clock struck midnight on the last day of December, Ethan stood beneath the stars and whispered a promise. "I will begin again." The town was quiet, the night was still, and somewhere deep inside, the next cycle had already begun.